Hi everyone, welcome to another workshop presented by the Writing Support Center. My name is Genesis and I'm one of the faculty here at PCC in the WSC. Today we're going to be talking about pre-writing and brainstorming. Now before we get into the actual presentation, I do want to apologize that this presentation is currently not in presentation mode. We are experiencing some technical difficulties with the website, as you can see right here. But as they say, the show must go on. So just an example for all of you, it is difficult to do consistent online work, and sometimes we run into technical difficulties. But rather than just throw our hands up in the air and say, oh well, we just adapt and overcome. So we can still give this presentation even if it's not in presentation mode. And we still want to be able to present this to all of you. So I do apologize, bear with me. I will probably be zooming in every now and then just to make sure that you all can see the text that is on the screen. But I do apologize once again for the technical difficulties. So with that being said, this is a quick overview of today's agenda for the workshop. So we're going to be starting off with a pre-writing definition. We're going to be talking about how to choose an essay topic, how to read a prompt, and then finally, we're going to end it off with some brainstorming strategies. So just some expectations for today. To get the most out of this workshop, we encourage you to take your time with the video. Feel free to pause and rewind whenever you need clarification. Maybe something went a little too fast. It's okay to pause this, rewind it a little bit. You know, you don't need to feel as if you need to rush through this video all at once. We really encourage you to take your time with it. We also ask that you complete the accompanying worksheet found in the module to put theory into practice. So all of our workshops come with an accompanying worksheet. This worksheet qualifies as participation and proof of attendance. So if you are doing this workshop for extra credit or it is part of an assignment, this worksheet is what you would show your professor to show that you attended and watched this workshop. There we go. Okay. So to start off, what is pre-writing? So pre-writing is the first stage of the writing process. So this is what you do before you even start writing for your paper. And it includes understanding the prompt, choosing your essay topic, brainstorming, research, and outlining. So for this particular workshop, we're going to be focusing on the first 3 items: how to understand your prompt, choosing your topic, and brainstorming. Again, these are just all the things that you do before you even start writing, just to get your ideas out, just to start thinking about the essay topic before you actually start writing. It's supposed to help with some organization, and also it's an opportunity for you to ask questions if there's something about the assignment that you don't understand. All right. So before we get into more information about the first couple steps, I really want you to think of your essay topics as roadmaps. So, sometimes, when you're driving down to a location that you've never been to, sometimes we want to take the road less traveled by. And sometimes that road is a dead end. You need to turn back, head back to the main highway. Other times it ends up bringing up a new adventure that you didn't expect. So I really want you to approach your essays with that same kind of mindset. And the 2 words that come to mind are consideration and exploration. So for consideration, be open to considering multiple points of view regarding your essay, and be open to considering different topics for your essay. So again, it's just exploring all the different options, which goes into the next point of exploration. Be open to exploring different topics. Sometimes the topic we start off with is not the topic we end with. So really be open to considering that sometimes the topic that you start off with is not going to be your final result because for a number of reasons. So for one, you might not have enough information to write about your initial topic, or maybe you start off with the topic, but then as you're writing you find that you were actually making a completely different argument, and that's completely fine. Part of writing is being open to the fact that things are going to change based on your research, your thought process, etc. So be open to considering those other topics and also exploring those other topics. And be open to changing your topic based on where your writing and your research leads you. So just some things to consider as you start writing more, as you start doing your research papers. These are just some things to keep in mind. So the first step of the writing process is understanding the prompt. So the prompt consists of three main parts. The first is background information and guiding questions. So background information refers to context about the task or the prompt. So sometimes when your professor gives you a prompt, they'll give you a little bit of a reminder of what it is you have been talking about in the unit, what it is that you have been talking about in the class. And all of that is just to serve as a frame of reference for you as you get into the actual assignment. The second part is guiding questions. So these guiding questions will usually appear at the end of your prompt, and these are additional questions provided to help with brainstorming. So some of these questions might look like, was this a good decision or a bad decision? As you're writing, consider the following questions. So these are just questions that'll help you get started, and they're really just to help you start thinking about what topic, what potential thesis statement you can write. The second part is the technical guidelines. So these are length and word requirements, citation formatting, number of sources needed, etc. So your professor will always tell you how long they want the paper to be. Are you writing a 4 to 5 page paper, a 10-page paper, or sometimes it's in a word requirement. Are you writing 2,000 words, 3,000 words? They'll also tell you the type of citation that they want you to use. So some professors will tell you this very clearly. Other times it's sort of insinuated based on the type of class that you're in. So if you're in an English class, chances are you're going to be using MLA formatting, whereas if you're in a psychology class, you will be using APA formatting. If you ever have questions on what kind of formatting you need to use, feel free to ask your professor, especially if it's not written on the assignment. They'll also tell you if you need to include any sources and how many. So, that'll usually look like, be sure to use 2 articles or 2 articles and 1 book. So, keep note of those because your professor will be looking at your bibliography, your works cited page to see whether or not you adhere to that technical guideline. Another technical guideline that is not written on here is, of course, the due date. So make note of when the paper is due because obviously that is a very important detail to keep in mind. And then finally, the last part of the prompt is the tasks. Tasks refers to key terms in the assignment, usually an action verb that tells you exactly what you need to do for the paper. So common examples include analyze something, describe something, explain something, research, investigate, and discuss, etc. In the module, we have a handout titled Essay Key Terms, and in that handout you will see a variety of key terms that are used very often in essay prompts along with their definition. So a lot of these terms, again, they're telling you what you want to do with the essay prompt. You know, they're telling you what to do in the essay. So if you're describing the situation of the events that led up to the Civil War, you know, chances are you're going to be listing a lot of a series of events, but also describing how those events led to led to the Civil War and their connection between one another. So you want to make sure that you have an understanding of those definitions of those words, because sometimes these key terms can be very overwhelming. Sometimes they cause confusion if you're not exactly sure what they mean. So feel free to use that handout as a means to have a better understanding of the definition, but also remember that you can always ask your professor if you're unsure of what a task entails. You know, if you have a question about it, feel free to ask your professor. They're the ones who created the prompt, so they know what they're expecting from you. And if you have questions that, you know, they want to see you succeed. So if you have questions, definitely recommend asking them. You can also come to the Writing Support Center and ask a tutor if you have any questions on a prompt. Let them know, like, this is what I think it's asking. Am I on the right track? You know, we're always here to help you. All right, so on the worksheet, we have an example prompt activity. So complete the following activity on the worksheet that is provided in the module. Read the sample prompt provided on the worksheet. If you'd like, you may also use a prompt from one of your classes. Identify the different parts of the prompt: background information, guiding questions, technical guidelines, and tasks. You may use the essay key terms handout provided in the module to find the tasks. So pause this video, go to the worksheet and complete that assignment. Again, you can either use the sample prompt that's provided in the worksheet, or you can use a prompt that has been assigned to you in one of your classes. On the worksheet, you'll see specified spaces for all of these individual parts. And so in those spaces, just be sure to type what information is the background information. So like what sentences describe the background information. And the reason we have you do that particular process is because those are actually the first steps that you should be doing when you get your essay prompt. So when you first receive your essay prompt, you should highlight and annotate key information. So this includes the due dates, the guidelines, the tasks, because all of that information is information that you should be referring back to as you're writing. Take note of the instructor's explanation. So you're usually when you're assigned an assignment, your professor will briefly go over it, provide some explanation, and really use that time to take note of questions. And that is whenever your professor provides those additional notes, you want to make sure that you're writing them down, because sometimes it's additional information that can help you as you're writing. You should also be making a list of the tasks. So we mentioned earlier that the tasks are the key terms. These are the specific things that your professor is asking you to do. So you really want to make sure that you're making a note of that, because you want to make sure that you're checking off each of those parts in your writing. So for me, it's really helpful to use that, because I use it as a sort of to-do list. If I'm being asked to research explain and reflect, if I focus too much on the first two parts, but I forget to add a little bit of a reflection, that might um, hurt me in the end because I didn't complete the entire task, the entire prompt that was provided. So just make sure to use it as a sort of to-do list to make sure if you're on the right track. And sometimes as we're writing, we start wondering, am I on the right track? Am I answering the prompt? If you refer back to these notes that you've taken for yourself, it can remind you, it can serve as a sort of checkpoint to see whether you're on the right track or not. And then of course, ask questions. Your professors are always open to answering questions. They want to see you succeed. So be sure to ask questions if there's anything that confuses you about the prompt or anything that you're still unsure about. Of course, you can always ask your professor, you can always ask the tutor, or ask your classmates. So if something is confusing, be sure to ask a question. Once you have an understanding of your essay prompt, you're able to start choosing your essay topic. So a good topic should answer the assignment. So again, we went through all the steps to make sure that we have an understanding of what the essay is asking us to do. So your topic should reflect that. A good topic should also be interesting to you. Just because it's something that is assigned to you doesn't mean you can't add a flair that is interesting to you. So you can always, especially if it's an open-ended prompt, you can choose a topic that is interesting to you so long as it pertains to the class. And spark questions you want to answer. So we're going to be talking about this a little more in the brainstorming strategies, but a good topic, again, you should feel like you want to write it, or at least have some interest in writing it. It shouldn't have to feel like it's a chore. It can be interesting to you. So when you're choosing your topic, there are some questions to consider. The first being, what is the prompt asking? Again, you want to make sure that it's answering the assignment. What interests you? So what are you interested in? The entire time that you have been in this class learning about new things, is there a topic that has come up that you wanted to learn more about? If so, maybe that is something that can be related to the essay prompt that you had just been assigned. And coincidentally, what do you want to learn more about? Again, research and essay writing doesn't have to be a chore. It can be interesting to you. So feel free to explore topics that you're interested in, so long as, of course, it relates to the class. So that's another question to consider is, does it relate to the class? Have there been topics that you have talked about in class that have been interesting to you, but maybe you didn't explore it enough? And if you are choosing a topic that maybe your professor hasn't recommended, just check in with them and let them know, like, I'm really interested in this particular topic. Is it okay if I write about it? Again, so long as it answers the prompt. And if they're okay with it, wonderful. If not, let's see how we can take the suggested topics and formulate them so that they fit your interests. Once we choose a topic, we're able to go into brainstorming. So we're going to talk about 3 brainstorming strategies. Of course, there are many more brainstorming strategies. These are only just a handful of them because if we could easily do an hour-long presentation about brainstorming. But something to note with all of these strategies is do not worry about being perfect. The main idea is just to get your ideas down on paper. You can always go back and make changes later, and you can also take note of questions that you may have in regards to these brainstorming strategies. So the first one is free writing. So just as the name sounds, with free writing, it's all about letting your thoughts flow out, writing whatever comes to mind. The crucial point is to keep writing, even if you believe you're not saying much. You'd be surprised how many secret gems you may find in these stream of consciousness method. So just, as I mentioned earlier, it's not about being perfect, so don't worry about grammar, don't worry about does this make sense. It's really just about seeing what ideas come out. So you may start off by writing down, I am currently trying to brainstorm for this essay, don't really have many ideas. I think we talked about XYZ, uh, etc. And just really seeing where those thoughts sort of take you, because sometimes it's just the fear of the blank page that can be a little intimidating. So once you get rid of the blank page, suddenly you find that your thoughts have an easier way to come out. If this is a method that works for you, be sure to set a time or a space limit. So you might want to set maybe a timer for 15 minutes, or maybe you tell yourself you'll stop writing once you reach one full page, and just continue writing until you reach that goal. So once the timer goes off, once you complete a whole page, then you just kind of stop and take a read of what you have written down and see, is there something there that you can use to start off with. Maybe you started talking about a topic very briefly, a topic that you had found interesting, and you can use that as sort of your starting point. The next strategy is free listing. In this technique, you jot down lists of words or phrases under a particular topic. You can base your list on the general topic, one or more words from your thesis claim, a word or idea that is the complete opposite of your original word or idea. It's similar to free listing or free writing, but instead of writing full sentences, you're just jotting down a list of ideas that come to mind. If you'd like, you can also set a time limit for this strategy. So very similar to free writing, you can either set a timer or a space limit, just so that way you don't feel like you have to continue writing for hours and hours on end. And for this one, again, you can also take note of questions that you may have. These questions could be really helpful as we move forward when we start doing our research. And then finally is clustering, also known as mind mapping or webbing. This is a very helpful tool for creating connections between ideas and concepts. So the way that you would do clustering or mind mapping, webbing, whatever it is you want to call it, you take a sheet of paper and place your main idea in the middle. Moving from the center, fill in the open space with concepts or terms that relate or oppose your central idea. Once you have your ideas, you can begin clustering them based on ideas that relate to one another. So you would draw a line between two connecting ideas. And this is really helpful for visualizing. I know for me, this is personally my favorite one to go to because I'm able to see the different ideas that I can talk about, and I'm able to see their connections, which helps me create a logical flow for my essay. So these are 3 brainstorming strategies. Again, do not worry about it being perfect. It's just about getting the ideas down. And really, you can choose whichever method works best for you. Maybe you only like to use one of these strategies, or maybe you would like to do a combination of them, whatever works best for you. All right, so now we're going to do another activity on the worksheet that's provided on the module. So be sure to complete that. And the activity reads, refer back to the prompt you worked on in the previous activity. What topics could you talk about in the essay? Once you decide, choose one of the brainstorming strategies and begin writing ideas for the essay. So this is just an opportunity for you to practice some of the strategies that we've talked about, and really just get into the habit of using those strategies. So that brings us to the end of today's workshop. Just a quick recap of some of the points that we talked about. One, pre-writing helps you plan for your essay. So pre-writing is a very helpful step to get your ideas out, start thinking about what it is you want to write about. And it's really just a space for you to make mistakes with no pressure added. Sometimes it's really intimidating to just start writing right away because you feel like you have to have everything perfect on the first go. Pre-writing kind of alleviates that pressure because you're just able to get your ideas down and go fix it later. Or maybe you realize that an idea didn't work and we want to explore something different. You must be open to explore different directions for a paper just in case your topic is too narrow or too broad. You really want to make sure that your paper, that your essay topic follows the Goldilocks rule where it's just right. You're able to write about just enough to meet the page requirement, but you don't want to have your topic be too broad where there's too many things you can talk about, or too narrow where there's not enough that you can talk about. So sometimes we need to explore different directions to make sure that we are hitting that Goldilocks rule. The prompt is your best friend. Your professor gives you instructions and directions in it, so it's important to know how to read it. So the prompt tells you exactly what the essay is supposed to be about. So you want to make sure that you have an understanding and ask questions if you have any about it, and make sure that you are clear on what the prompt is asking you before you actually start writing your paper, because it can be even more frustrating if you have one understanding for the prompt and then you realize that your understanding was a little off from what the professor intended you to do, but you've already written the whole paper based off of your understanding. So you want to make sure that you have that understanding early on to prevent those kinds of mishaps. And then finally, brainstorming helps get your ideas and questions onto the page. This can help when creating your research question, your thesis, your goal for the paper. So brainstorming strategies are really just a way for you to get as many ideas down, and sometimes these ideas become the base for your essay, whether that's coming up with some research questions to help you do some research, whether that's ideas for your thesis, the main argument of your paper, or what it is that you want your audience to take away from your paper, otherwise the main goal of it. All right. So thank you for joining today's workshop. If you want support during your pre-writing or brainstorming stage, feel free to visit us in the virtual Writing Support Center. You can go to pasadena.edu/writing center /index.php and click on Meet with the Tutor. It'll be the first button on the page. Our tutors are more than happy to help you get started with your paper. You do not need to come in to meet with the tutor with a completed essay. We can help you at any stage of the writing process. So thank you, everyone. Continue to stay safe and have a good rest of your week.